So good to be in Birmingham, my first time in Birmingham. Well, I went through the airport last Wednesday, but that doesn't count. Kind of flew in from Amsterdam, had 4 days in Amsterdam, consulting with the church there. And Pastor Mark and Gillian, thank you so much for having me in your church. It's such an honour and a privilege to be in a church that is orange, which is my favourite colour. It's actually our brand colour for Grow a Healthy Church, our consulting ministry. But it's such a joy to be here and just to kind of love this building. This building is phenomenal. We built a new building about 18 years ago on our property, 5 acres of land in Perth. Who's ever been to Perth, Western Australia? Anyone? Is there anyone been to Perth? Oh my goodness, you must all come. You're good-looking young people. You'll just love Perth. You'll fit in magnificently because we only have beautiful people there. Well, maybe not. But thank you so much for having me. And you guys are doing a phenomenal job here, building a great church. We've only connected a couple of times, but I can just, in this atmosphere and in this building, I know you don't build buildings like this unless you're phenomenal pastors and leaders. Please put your hands together and appreciate your pastors tonight. Come on, a bit more sugar for your pastors. Bless them. Appreciate them. You've got to love your pastors. Happy pastor, happy life. Grumpy pastor, not a happy life. We pastored in our church for 30 years. We're still in our church, but I'm hardly ever there because we're out doing consulting and coaching. I've been a member of our church now for 44 years. My wife's been a member of our church for 49 years. So we've got a combined input into our church. We're kind of getting up to the mid-90s now. So I believe in the church. I love hanging around the church. I love being around church people. I love Jesus, but I love his church as well. We pastored there for 30 years. 6 years ago, started a ministry, Grow a Healthy Church. We do consulting and coaching with churches around different nations in the world. And I've just finished, this afternoon, I just finished consult number 104 in the last 6 years. We go in for 4 days into a church and help a church in every which way possibly that we can. So as Pastor Mark mentioned, I'm not doing a Bible study tonight. I do love my Bible. I have a retro Bible. Paper Bible. Some of you are not sure what that is. You're kind of digital Bible. I've got a retro Bible and digital Bible. So I'm not going to do a big Bible study. I'll bring out a couple of scriptures, but I really want to give you a lot of pragmatics about growing your church to 1,000 and beyond that 1,000. And your church that's growing, healthy churches grow to their optimum size is one of my proverbs. And so optimizing your church to reach its full potential, its full assignment, its full call is essential. And I love whiteboards, primarily because if I get a bit, sorry, that's me being a bad Australian. Do Birmingham people have a good sense of humour? You kind of, okay, cool. We'll get on brilliantly then, because every now and then it'll get a little bit wild. So I want to take a 40-minute session. Is that a countdown? Oh, fantastic, a countdown. Oh, put up a calendar instead. That'd be better. No, I'm kidding. So I want to talk firstly about you, then I'll talk about your church, and I'm just going to go until the 40 minutes is done, and I'll cover too much material, I think, for you to write everything down, but feel free to write everything down. So I'm just going to do a fire hydrant deal. Is that okay? And it'll be a bit at times, but I'm sure you're recording this and you can kind of listen to it again. How many of you are on staff at the church? Some sort of, you're paid maybe days or hours a week. There's a number of you on staff here. How many of you lead a department of the church? You're responsible for a department of the church. Awesome. How many of you lead a team within the church? You kind of lead a team of people maybe within yeah, put your hands up. Don't be shy. It's okay. We like team leaders. How many of you are on a team in a church? How many of you just wandered in off the street and you're not sure what you're doing here tonight, but you heard there was a free food afterwards? No, not me. No, I mean on purpose. 1 Timothy 4:16, Paul writes to this young leader leading a church, watch your life. Other translations, take heed to yourself, pay close attention to yourself. So I want to talk about you for a while here. I'll fill this up down this side. Because I think primarily if you're going to grow a church, you will not grow it just through programs and activities and ministries and vision and leadership and all that. It will be grown through you. so you will make the difference in the health and the growth of the church. And I don't want you to kind of get crushed by that. If it feels like, oh my goodness, it's on me, learn just how to kind of push that off to the Lord as well. So you carry weight by carrying it with Christ, and walking with Christ is essential. Okay, let's do a number of things around you. Number one, look after yourself. This is my first point of the whole night. How do you grow a church? Look after yourself. Walk with Jesus. Have a place and a time to connect with Jesus. Love the Bible. Pray. Offload anxiety and worry and challenges and problems to the Lord just by learning to pray. Look after yourself in a physical sense as well. About 15 months ago, I got one of these. It's buried under my shirt there. Look, one of these obsessive step things. A Fitbit. So awesome. I'm kind of cranking out steps and looking at how many have I done today. I think I'm up about 6,000. Four times a week, I try to do 10,000 steps. And that's sometimes because I'll go for a walk out of home. I've been filling up so many steps walking around in Europe. I was in Utrecht doing this consult, and because the inner city is so hard to get a car into, I had to walk to the church 10 to 15 minutes, kind of like 2 or 3 times a day in temperatures of 3 degrees. It was just awesome for an Aussie boy coming from the summer. But I got my steps up. You have to sweat to become a good church leader. I don't mean sweat by anxiety, I mean sweat by exercise. Having an exercise program has been part of my 40 years of following Christ. Sometimes it's swimming, sometimes when I was younger it was jogging, sometimes I'll join a gym. At the moment I'm just kind of busting up the walking thing, and so I've got massive thighs under these jeans. You don't want to see my legs, they will just make you feel embarrassed about your legs. I'm kidding. Learn to have a positive distraction in your life. My positive distraction is photography. It's got nothing to do with church, nothing to do with ministry, nothing to do with leadership. I get my camera out. I bought myself a new Sony a6000 last year. It's a really cool little camera. I got a Canon 60D, which is a great one of those big cameras that people look at and go, wow, it's a big camera. This one's a real cool little camera. We were on holidays on the South Coast a few weeks ago, back in December, and down our South Coast, we've got these massive granite rocks in this place called The Gap. Big storm came in, massive waves going up about 10 stories high, hitting these granite rocks, and I'm standing there in the breeze, the salt air, and the water coming in, and I'm shooting and everything, and people are always getting blown off this cliff. It was so fantastic. You know what I was thinking about church at that time? Absolutely nothing. It's a positive, you need a positive addiction that distracts you from leadership. Now, some of you are volunteers in the church. Your positive distraction is actually ministry in church, because it's totally different from work. But if you're fully involved in church life, as some of you are as staff, you need something that is not church at all. It's good for you. Okay, number 2. Here's a practice that I've done probably for about 15 years. I'm kind of writing this for me because it's probably very hard for you to read. I'm going to need a rubber thingy to rub that off somewhere as well, because I'm going to fill that board up. Learn to intentionally reflect. What do I mean by that? I reckon you should twice a month get somewhere for 30 minutes and ask yourself a bundle of questions about your life. I'll give you a few of those questions. Thank you very much. But if you go to my website, growahealthychurch.com, go to my blog and just search for reflection, you'll find a blog post about this very topic and a whole range of questions. So about every 5 or 6 weeks, I sit down, sometimes in a cafe, sometimes in a plane, sometimes somewhere else where I just want to be alone. I'll ask myself these sort of questions. How's my marriage? How am I doing as a dad? How am I being as a friend? What 2 words at the moment describe my life? What should I stop doing? What should I start doing? First 2 books of the Bible, Genesis, starting, beginning, Exodus, leaving, exiting. Great questions. What should I begin? What should I stop? What should I prune? How's my integrity? Here's another great question. How can I make more money? I asked that question because in our consulting coaching ministry, we started 6 years ago from absolutely nothing and have built it up from that. I now have 10 income streams into that ministry. One of the reasons is I asked myself, how can I make more money? I don't do consulting to make money. I make money so I can do consulting and coaching and help churches. But it's a great question to ask yourself, and you might have no answer for it, but why don't you start interrogating yourself and then start saying, Lord, how can I make more money? Who like to make more money? Well, some of us. The rest are just happy. Then there's a second type of reflection, and I call this think like a leader. And I haven't got these questions on a blog post. I probably should do a blog post on this. But it's good to sit down about every month, 5-6 weeks, and ask questions like this. I call this thinking like a leader. And one of the key things to grow a church to 1,000, to 1,500, to 2,000 is that more and more of you become expanding leaders. Not just that people would come through the door and ready-made leaders, but that you develop leadership skills. And you may not have a strong leadership gift, but you can develop immense leadership skills. One of the ways is to reflect, ask yourself these sort of questions. How am I fulfilling vision? What's the atmosphere like in the team that I am? See, leaders don't just think about tasks, they think about atmospheres. Your pastors know how to create an atmosphere. Tonight we're singing a couple of songs, and Sunday night you might feel a bit tired, and I have to go into a leaders meeting. There's a strange guy from Australia I've never heard before. I hope it's not boring, but there's a couple of songs, and suddenly you're worshiping. Pastor is up here and saying, hey, it's great to be here. That's creating atmosphere. And you are built to build atmospheres. Ask yourself how you're doing with that. What will I look like in 2 years? Will I look like George Clooney? I wish, but it ain't going to happen. Where am I not leading? Where am I not leading? What awkward conversation am I avoiding? Oh, that's a good question. Oh, that's an ouch question. We'll move on. That's an ouch question. Who needs to move into a new role in the team I'm working with? It's just sitting down, and we do this. I don't know about British people, but I know Australians are activists and task-oriented doing people. We're not a reflective culture. So I've had to train myself to sit down and interrogate myself to boost my leadership capacity and ability. A few questions there for you. Okay, number 3. I'll put it up here. Be a leader who develops leaders. This will be more relevant for some of you than others. I apologize for my writing. I would have made a great doctor. Be a leader who develops leaders. How do you develop other people? And if you have people in your team, you want them to see them grow and develop. One of the best ways you can grow and develop other people is give them a project. Give them something to do. Give them some training. Give them some upskilling. And then step back and let them have a go. And if they're about to fail, unless it's going to cause damage to other people, let them fall over. Because they're going to learn through that falling over and through that failure. One of the greatest things you can do is give people projects that they can succeed or fail at. Another thing, I love doing this. I was doing this with a church I was working with late last year. I call this a 4 before. Ask people that you're working with who you want to develop and you're leading. Ask them to achieve 4 things in 4 weeks. It may be that they don't ever listen to a podcast. And maybe they were going to listen to 1 podcast in 4 weeks. Maybe they've never read a book, or get them to read half a book if they can't read a whole book in 4 weeks. Maybe they've never shared their faith with someone. Get them to share their faith with someone in 4 weeks. Whatever it is, maybe their prayer life is in the toilet and they never pray at all other than Jesus help me kind of today sort of deal. See if you can get them to pray for 5 minutes a day for 5 days a week for that 4 weeks. The key thing with a 4x4 is it must have a number, because a number puts an edge on it. If you want to grow yourself, do this for yourself. Give yourself a 4x4 deal and then tell someone else what your 4 things are. And make sure it's a number on it. People say, my goal is to get fitter. That's not a goal, that's a wish. A goal is I'm going to go to the gym 3 times this week for 40 minutes at a time. That's a goal because it's got a number on it. You can measure it, you can put a cross against it or tick it. This is a great way to develop people. I think another great way to develop people is network people into a bigger world. Hanging out, I get to hang out with all sorts of pastors. I coach pastors from churches of 1,000 plus down to a Salvation Army guy I was coaching. He had 25 people in his church. 12 people turned up on Sunday. His dream was to have 75 people in his church. Just all sorts of people. But I tell you what, when I hang around leaders like Pastor Mark, Pastor Julie, there's a bigness about them that I've just come from consulting with a church, a couple of hundred, and it's kind of a regional church, beautiful church, great family church. But it's kind of like, it's at a place, it's a good place, but you hang around bigger people and you kind of go, okay, I need to kind of stretch a bit here. When you feel yourself intimidated, this didn't happen to me tonight, so I just want to make that clear. When you feel yourself intimidated by someone, it's a sign that you need to grow. When I'm around a bigger person and I feel intimidated, I go, oh, wow. What I do now is I go, wow, this is awesome. You mean you say it's awesome? You feel intimidated? Absolutely, because I just reached my boundary. I reached my limit, and I push into that. And when I feel that, I go, oh, cool. Because when you hit a boundary, you can move it. If you never hit it, you can't move it. So what we tend to do when we're intimidated, we back off from people. I don't do that anymore. What I do is I start asking them questions. Ask them about their skill set that impresses you or intimidates you, and just listen. Hardest thing sometimes to do is ask a question and shut up. But it's a powerful tool. Hang around bigger people. It really does help you. Okay, number 4. This is a dog's breakfast up here. Look at this. No numbers, nothing, John. I just like writing. Release your senior pastors. Not out. In a church your size and where you're going to, 1,000 and beyond, and 1,500, 2,000, you have to release your pastors and you have to train the congregation. And what's in you will get down into people around you. That your pastors should be focused really probably on 2 or 3 things. Leadership, preaching, I'll make it 4, strategy and atmosphere. And pretty well if your pastors are doing leadership and preaching and kind of strategy at a high level, not down at tactics level, but a strategy level, and atmosphere, and focus on that, take the rest of the week off. Do nothing else. Don't expect in a church this size your pastors to pastor you. Expect them to lead you. And you've got to put that spirit and heart into everyone who comes in this church, because people will come from small church, medium-sized churches, and they'll be kind of like, hey, Pastor Mark, Pastor Jillian, so good. Man, I'm going to connect with this guy. No, you're not. It's never going to happen. People need a reality check about that, and people can get a bit snipey. I know in Australia they do. I don't know about here in Britain, but you ever get a bit snipey? Oh, pastor this and pastor that. Say, no, our pastor, this is what our pastor does. Leadership. He does the platform preaching, and he looks after the atmosphere of the house, and he can have the rest of the year off. Seriously. You've got to support that and keep... And actually, can I encourage you, those of you are really key leadership around your senior pastors, every now and again just remind them, hey, you don't have to worry about that. Come on, we got that. Go away and pray. Have a retreat. Go to Australia again. Just wait on the Lord. Go do some atmosphere sort of stuff with preaching, with leadership, pastoring. Our churches would do better if we did more of that, to be honest. Anyway. Number 5. This is terrible. I'm so sorry. Making every teacher in the room look good, eh? That's why I play golf with my friends. It makes them feel good about their golf. Number 5, get a coach. Get someone to coach you. Find an area of your skill set that you're not great at. Find someone who's good at it and take them out for a coffee and just ask them a million questions, and then get them to ask you a bundle of questions. And I'm going to do a bit of workshopping in the second session that will help you around that. In the Christian world, we have conferences. I love conferences. Conferences inspire me. They boost me. They build my faith. You kind of feel like, wow, it's awesome. We can take the world. I love that. But coaching is different, and it's phenomenal. I mean, you Brits are the same as Australians. We love sport. I won't mention the cricket because I'm not really a big cricket guy, but I won't mention the Ashes. Did I just mention the Ashes? I apologise, and some now people hate me. But it's amazing in our national obsession with sport that we have in Australia that it would be ridiculous to not have a coach. It'd be stupid. Right across from the little kids to the professionals, everyone has a coach. In the business world, it's acknowledged that if you want to get in the corporate world, get a coach in to help you. You know what? It's not big in church. I think we're behind the 8 ball here. Find yourself a coach, and a coach is someone who can do 2 things. Generally, they can have a skill set you don't have. That's one aspect of coaching. Or they can ask you questions that make you pop out from where you are into another realm. I'll do a bit more on that in the second session. But I would say, here's a great prayer for you to take home. Lord, get me a coach. At the moment, I engaged last October, a digital strategy coach. We do a lot of stuff online. I've been blogging for about 9 years. I've got a membership hub for Christian leaders and pastors. I do a huge amount of stuff online. And a whole bundle of it free, some you have to buy, that's okay, a bit of a mix. And I kind of hit a ceiling of what I could do. I'm a bit geeky. Any geeks here tonight? It's kind of like, you go, geeks kind of go, yeah, I'm cool, man. I'm just, geeks don't do that. I'm cool. I'm a geek. I'm geeky. But I hit a wall last year. So I engaged a guy to coach me. It's costing me way too much money. But he's moving me into realms and helping me to achieve things that I would never have got done. It's done the last 4 months. It's just shifted me in areas. I love getting a coach into my world for where I need one. Begin to pray this prayer. Lord, give me a coach. Just see what God does with that. I reckon I'll answer that prayer. Okay, last one about you. And I'm doing well with the time. I'm thrilled with myself. Commit to vision. I love your vision. Making champions for life, to life, or for life? For life. Making champions for life. I love that. I read that on your website. And I saw it last year in Champion Church. And it's so succinct. It's easy to put away. It's easy to remember. And it's kind of not religious, which is always cool. Australians don't like religion much. That sort of sense of bringing people into a bigger world. When a church gets larger, it cannot operate anymore on communication. Because you cannot know everything. No one in this room knows everything that's going on in this church. No one. Senior pastors don't. No staff member does. No key leaders do. And I find consulting with smaller churches, one of the things they have to move through to be a medium church is I have to say, you have to let go of the desire to know all that's going on. Because if you hang on to that, you'll keep shrinking the church down to your ability and capacity to know all that's going on. So when a church gets bigger, it's not about you knowing all that's getting on and going on. It's about you capturing the vision, because the vision is the glue in a large church. The mission, the assignment, the lifeblood of a large church, is that vision. And buying into that vision. And I think if I was a leader in this church, I would probably change some of my language if I was a leader in your church. Because the word champion is not a word that I use in my everyday language. But if I was a leader in this church, I would start using that word. I'd start actually looking in the mirror and saying, John, you're a champion. For Australian, that's embarrassing. Are there any Americans here tonight? Americans just think they're champions all the time, regardless of what anyone says. They're just kind of champions. They've got a hero culture. We don't have a hero culture in Australia. We don't kind of operate like that. But if I was a leader in this church, my language would be infiltrated by the word champion. And I'd start to use it around people. Say, man, you can be a champion dad. You can be a champion husband. You can be a champion business person. Come on, you can change your life. You don't have to kind of get down the bottom. You can climb up and you can be the top of your world with your skills and capacity and so on. It's such a great, great vision. Woo! Getting excited on Sunday night. And that language, you know, God has created us differently. We have speech. Speech was first used in Genesis 1, not for communication. It was used for creation. God didn't communicate. Could someone turn the lights on? He created, let there be light. And your language, that word champions, should just be part, and it helps create within your own headspace and in your ministry to other people as well. So there's a few things for you to work on. Look after yourself in a whole range of ways. Intentionally reflect. Put something in your calendar. The next couple of weeks, you're going to set aside some 20, 30 minutes to do some reflection. Find out those questions on my blog post. If you like, listen to the recording again, pick up those questions. Be a leader who develops leaders. Release your senior pastors. Get a coach and make a commitment to the vision and utilizing the vision. Okay, let's jump into... Can I get someone to come and just rub all that off for me? Can someone jump up and do that for me? It saves me having to kind of double task. Thank you. I'm working hard up here. I'm sweating. I don't know in England whether I'm hot or cold. It kind of, I look at the temperatures coming over, it's like 3 degrees. We're having a mild summer, really mild summer in Perth. It's like 30 degrees. I'm sorry, that's a mild summer. We're loving it because we're not dying in 42-degree heat. That's not really pleasant. But I come to England and I'm kind of inside all the time and I'm hot. And I'm going, what am I doing hot in England? What is this? It's the lights. Oh man, it's just kind of doing my head in a bit. Okay, good to go? Cool. Another short bit and then we'll have a break. 1 Timothy 3, verse 14. Although I hope to come to you soon, I'm writing you these instructions so that if I'm delayed, you'll know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the foundation of the truth. I want to give you a whole range of things that will help you grow your church, improve the health of your church, and kind of help you conduct yourself in the life of your church. Number 1 is sharpen. I'll do a better job this time. Sharpen your assimilation of new people. I'll give you a few ideas about this, one of my passions in churches. There's a thing called the churn factor that you just have to embrace. Every year people will leave this church and every year people will join this church. And your churn factor will go from anything of 10% of your church even up as high as 30%. I was at Willow Creek Community Church a number of years ago for a leadership seminar, and the executive pastor told us that their churn rate in their church of 30,000 people is 30%. 9,000 people leave their church every year. And then another 9,000 turn up. Embrace the churn factor. It happens in the street where you live. It happens at your workplace. People come and go. It's just a normal part of modern day living. Embrace it. When people leave, bless them. Love them. Even if they slam the door, don't slam the door on them. Embrace the churn factor. Get used to it. It's a part of church life today. One of the things that you do have to sharpen is this whole pathway of assimilation, of onboarding people quicker. I don't know enough about your church, whether you have a pathway for people to come in and connect to the church. What I'm encouraging pastors today is not only have a meeting to connect new people to the church, but put all the stuff, all the info you want to give a new person, put it into a podcast. Just a 7-episode podcast, 5-episode podcast that sits out there in podcast land that anyone can listen to at any time. Put it on YouTube, and you can send your new people to YouTube or to a podcast. Put it on a PDF. In other words, quicken the process of engagement of a new person into the life of the church. If you're involved in anything with new people, there is phenomenal material out and about now. If you go to, again, I'll plug my website again. I like plugging my blog. I try and keep up to date with things about this, and churches are getting better at this, but you can't rely on a system you had 2 years ago to assimilate new people. With new technology, I believe we can do it quicker. And if you have this kind of series of values and vision, Pastor Mark, just put on a little podcast. Just to sit out there. Trust me, people will listen to it. Put on YouTube as a series they can subscribe to. People will watch that sort of stuff. Number 2, always, always, always run leadership development groups. Never stop running leadership development groups. One of the weaknesses of the church, I find again and again in consulting, is that pastors and leaders and churches don't have leadership development groups. A friend of mine, a guy, C3 pastor in Canberra, in his 50s, he kind of hit upon this about 4 or 5 years ago, realized he wasn't doing enough of this. So he set up a structure in his church where he meets once a month with 3 different groups of guys. Young adults who are single, young married guys who are married without kids, and young married guys with kids. All together, it's about 30 guys. His wife does exactly the same with the girls, with the ladies. They have about 60 people a year in leadership development groups, year in, year out, in a church of 500. You know what he's found after 2 or 3 years? He's got a whole crop of emerging leaders. Do everything you can, and I know you'd have a structure you've got to fit in with, but please get passionate about bringing people together. Even if you just read together, pray together, hang out together, say, I don't know how to do leadership development. Get John Maxwell to help you. Just photocopy a few chapters of his, no, probably buy the book, I shouldn't say photocopy. Get people to read, discuss it, pray with people, talk. It's hanging out together around some information that will grow leaders. It's actually not that difficult. It just takes a lot of work. That's all. Number 3, measure what matters. And I know I'm going to some kind of deep diving church growth stuff, but it's kind of good for you to, I think, know some of this stuff that affects how churches grow. There's a number of things churches must measure. The number of people getting baptized. And I measure and look for a rate of about 7 to 9% of your average Sunday attendance. So if a church has 100 people on average turn up on a Sunday, I want to look and see if I can see about 8 people getting baptized a year, good number. I find it a tremendous way of encouraging churches. Most pastors go, we're not baptizing enough people. And I kind of look at their numbers and say, man, you're killing it. You are doing awesome. I was just in the church in the Netherlands. They were baptizing over 10% of their average Sunday attendance. He's going, man, we're not doing enough. I said, you're doing more than enough. Come on, work out what you need to measure what matters. Percentage of people in small groups and volunteering, that will tell you a huge amount. You got to know what percentage of your adults are in small groups. Should be 60% or above if you really want strong health in your small groups. And the percentage of adults in volunteering. Now, here's the sad thing about larger churches. The larger you get, the percentage of adults volunteering trends downward. And it's very hard to lift it up. In a church your size, if you're getting 50 to 60% of your adults serving, you're doing pretty good. If you can get it to 65, 70%, tell me what you're doing and you're putting into the people's drinks, and then I will work with you to sell it to other churches. In large churches, more people freeload. More people spectate. But if you can get around a 50, 60% in a large church, I think you're doing really well. Another thing you must measure is how many people do we have visiting? And that's a hard thing to do because you try and get as many connections as you can, and then you have to have a guest. You had a baptism service this morning. How many people got baptized? 13. Woohoo! I love it. You get all sorts of visitors come to baptisms. You got kind of grandparents who wander in going, what is this? This is not a church. Not the church when I was a kid, you know, orange seats, what the? I love it. And you kind of have to guess some numbers about that, but track your visitor numbers. Important to measure that. Okay, number 4, I am deep diving now. Create a vision-centered budget. I can hear the amens and hallelujahs over this amazing stuff. What a church should do about every 3 years is do what's called zero-based budgeting. You wipe everything clean, and as if you were starting again, how would you spend your money? It's a really good process because it kind of makes you think, what are our priorities? And of course, you're going to have commitments, building-wise, staff-wise, and ministries and so on. But it's really good just to wipe it and sit down with your key team, the board that's doing that, and say, where should we put our money? Where should we raise our money? And sometimes just by kind of wiping the slate, you can do this in different areas of your life. You could do it with your own personal budget. Is actually wipe your budget and go, I wonder how we could spend our money different. I worked out recently how much we spend of our income. We're down to living now off 72% of our income. And we save over 10%. Our goal is always to save 10%, give at least 10%. I've given more than 10% for decades, but I would like to. I tell people I've stopped tithing. I'd like to lower my giving down to a tithe because it's way above a tithe and has been for a long time. But zero-based budget is not a bad personal thing to do, but definitely as a church, those of you involved in finance, have a crack at this. It makes you think through what you want to do. Number 5. We okay out there? Still awake? Smart staffing. Okay, staff are getting nervous now. Man, I am sweating something chronic. I feel like I'm back in summer at home. Smart staffing. Traditionally, what churches have done in staffing is once you've got the pastor and you've got an administrator, you'll staff into 2 areas primarily. Next generation, might be children's or youth, and then in worship. What I encourage churches, especially a church of your size when it comes to staffing, is to really staff around visitors and new Christians. Put money into employing people that will focus in on that area because your church will only grow through visitors. It won't grow any other way. It doesn't matter how much you pray and fast and believe God, cast vision and so on. The only way your church grows is through visitors. That's why visitors, I reckon on a Sunday, are probably the most important people in the house. Well, the members are, but you know what I'm saying. I think in terms of treating them as guests and VIPs is so important. Therefore, I encourage churches, when they start to think about where you're going to throw money in staffing, I say throw money at having a new person's. I'll go to a church of 200 people and say, can you find 3 hours of salary for a new people's director? If you can find 3 hours of salary for a new people's director in your church who looks after your visitors, you will keep more visitors. You'll get more people back for a second visit. You'll get more back for a third visit and a fourth visit because you'll have someone fixated and obsessed on that area. I also tell churches your sizes to employ a volunteers director. In our church, we people are laughing. Is that okay? It's like, do you have a volunteers director on your staff? Voluntary. It's cool. Never pay this person because next point. We visited Dianne, a mega church in Melbourne a few years ago, Crossway Baptist Church of, 4,000 or 5,000, just a monster church in a multi-ethnic area that runs all sorts of different language services. And they have 5 pastors on staff to look after their small groups. 5 pastors. Okay, that gives you an idea of the size. So I like going to mega churches because they do things a bit different and they're a bit of an incubator for stuff that pops out later into medium, small churches. And they said to me, because mega churches tend to track everything that moves, they're really good on analysing their numbers. They said to me that if a new person is not in a small group or volunteering in the first 12 months, 93% of their new people leave. 93%. So I am a huge fan of giving a volunteers director 1 hour of salary a week to pay a volunteer's director, because you can then get someone obsessed and fixated about moving people out of spectating into serving. And when people start to serve, they lock in. The health of the church goes up. The growth of the church goes up because they feel better about being in the life of the church because they're putting in. They're not just taken out. It's worth putting stuff into that area. And I won't talk about areas where I wouldn't kind of staff, because you might have staff there and that would make me not popular. I won't do that. Number 6, I think I'll do a couple more. I've got a few minutes. Build a leadership pipeline. And there's some really good material coming out about leadership pipelines now. But let me give you one tip about a leadership pipeline. I think amongst your key leaders, and probably not to every leader who's here, but definitely among department heads, staff members, and some key leaders in the life of the church, what's a really good thing to do is print out a list of everybody who's doing nothing in the life of the church. So the very beginning of a leadership pipeline is those who are part of the church but don't serve. And what you do with that list is you begin to pray over it. Jesus told us, besides the Lord's Prayer, to pray for 2 specific things. He said, if you're in Jerusalem during the Great Tribulation, pray that it doesn't happen in winter, so you'll be able to flee and survive out in the desert. You and I don't need to worry about that prayer. Unless you're going to live in Jerusalem and the Great Tribulation turns up, and God bless you if you are. But there's a second prayer that Jesus told us to pray that I think as leaders we should be praying every week, and you should pray it over this do nothing list. Pray the Lord of the harvest that there be laborers and workers in the harvest. So Jesus didn't tell us to pray for many things, but I find in churches we don't pray for those people who are doing nothing. And I would encourage you to produce that list. I would not circulate it across the whole church. Hey, I'm on the list. What am I doing on the list? Oh, we're praying for you, bro. Praying for you, man. We love you. We're just praying for you. Oh, thanks for praying for me. What are you praying? Hey, I got to go now. Targeted prayer over people who are doing nothing in your church will produce results. Rock solid guarantee, because Jesus said it. Not because I said it. Jesus will answer that prayer, guaranteed. Rock solid. Okay, I'll do one more. What are you up to? Think smart about pathways. There's a huge amount of material, and a lot of material comes out of America. The Americans just don't know how to not publish. It's true, they just publish like there's no tomorrow, which is kind of cool, but sometimes they publish too quickly. I heard Peter Wagner, who was a great church growth guy back in the 80s and 90s. I heard him at a conference say he just doesn't like to live with an unpublished idea. If he gets an idea, he just likes to write a book and publish. I'd prefer, Peter, if you waited a little while before you publish, because a year later you might change your mind. So a lot of stuff comes out of the States that I would prefer would never cross the Atlantic or the Pacific, because it doesn't always help. And there's a lot around at the moment about pathways, of not thinking about programs, of pathways. And pathways is a tremendous truth. You and I, as human beings, are designed to go down roads, sidewalks, footpaths, pathways. And if there's good signage, you can get people. We've just built a brand new stadium in Perth, 60,000-seater stadium. It is stunning. And they've got trains going to it, and most people are used to driving cars, not getting on trains, so they're having to kind of educate the whole city about how to get on a train and how to follow a path. And I went to a big open day there the other Sunday. It was unbelievable, beautiful, brand new, world-class stadium. And all you had to do was walk around and find a path and see a sign, and we're just like a bundle of sheep just following that. So pathways are brilliant, but they're not brilliant overall in churches. Let me tell you where a pathway works. A pathway works for new people coming into the church, integrating and assimilating them into small groups and into serving. Pathways are brilliant for that. Where pathways are not brilliant is what I believe is discipleship. And I think sometimes churches at the moment are tripping over themselves thinking, if we can develop a pathway for discipleship, then we'll get people on the pathway and we'll get them discipled. I think there's some good truth in that, but if I can just tweak that, and I'm speaking totally into a vacuum, I don't know what you do, so I may be saying something out of order here, but I think discipleship happens through a chaotic spider web, not through a pathway. I reckon discipleship is just all over the shop because everyone's level of need and maturity is different. And I don't think you can create a kind of sausage-making machine and put people on it and out pops a disciple. I think you just create scenarios and opportunities and places and times where people weave in and connect with each other. And Jesus, in a remarkable, miraculous way, designs things that people exactly need for them. So make sure you have a pathway for assimilation, but for discipleship, enjoy the chaos. Amen.